Okay, so on the next slide here, I'm wondering where you're all from. And I know that from your registrations, but Tracy may not know where each of you are from. So if you could use the magic wand, which is below the solid blue square, and then put the magic wand click on about where you live, then that would be great. So if everybody could do that now, that would be great. Okay, so there's a couple done. So click on the magic wand, please, below the solid blue square, and then click on where you're from. Good, looks like 4 of us have done that now. One more person, great. So we're all able to use the whiteboard, and we all selected where we were from. Okay, so I'm going to start the webinar about the high school Operation Water Drop kits. I'm going to give kind of a general overview as well as how the Safe Drinking Water Foundation has traditionally told teachers or suggested that they use the kits in their classrooms. So the high school Operation Water Drop kits, which it sounds like a couple of you are familiar with, looks like this one. It comes in your classroom. And it's got this box full of materials and bags, and everything's labeled, but it kind of looks like there's a whole bunch of stuff, and you may not know what to do with it. You may think, oh gosh, I don't have time for this. So I'm going to help you out with that to figure out what you need to do with the kit at this point. So the webinar presenters today are Tracy Webb, who is a longtime board member of the Safe Drinking Water Foundation, and she has used the high school Operation Water Drop kits in her classroom for many years in her high school science classes at Horton High School in Wolfville, Nova Scotia. And she's going to be presenting how she uses the kits in her classroom, how she has done so for many years, which is an alternative method that sometimes works better for her, as well as giving some practical tips to teachers about using the kits in their classrooms. And I'm Nicole Biederbeck, and I'm the Director of Education at the Safe Drinking Water Foundation. I've worked here at the Safe Drinking Water Foundation since 2006, and I'm in charge of distributing kits to schools across Canada and answering teachers' questions and many other facets of the organization. So you may be wondering how you get this awesome kit. So a lot of schools, unfortunately, don't have the funding available to purchase the kits themselves. So thankfully, we have a lot of funding from the TD Friends of the Environment Foundation for certain areas to send sponsored kits to schools. So many kits are sponsored by the TD Friends of the Environment Foundation and other sponsors. And kits can, of course, also be purchased by schools or school divisions themselves at reasonable prices. So if you want to find out if your school is eligible to receive a sponsored kit, please contact us. And from time to time, we also have other sponsors who allow us to send sponsored kits to schools across Canada thanks to their funding. At the beginning of the school year, we had funding from the Shell Environmental Fund to send some Operation Water Biology kits, our newest program, to schools across Canada. And we also get funding each year a little bit for Saskatchewan schools from SaskTel to send kits to schools in Saskatchewan. And there's other pockets of funding that we receive from time to time as we're always applying for funding. Remember that although the materials in the kit are safe to use, it is important to always use proper lab procedures and be careful when working in the lab. There are a lot of teachers who have sent me pictures of their students using the kit, and it scares me a little bit when I see them not using any gloves and not taking proper procedures into place. So just remember that even though they are extremely safe kits, students should also be using gloves, especially when they do the arsenic test. The rest aren't so critical. And also I know that it's standard procedure in a lot of science classroom or labs to use gloves and to use goggles. So use those same procedures and that same safety. So the first thing you do when you get this box of what looks like random materials, you're not sure what it is quite yet, is you need to split up the materials for the 4 groups of students. And this is the recommendation that the Safe Drinking Water Foundation has traditionally given, but there's lots of different ways to do it, and Tracy is going to be discussing another alternative about midway through this webinar. So group 1 does only arsenic, and that's the one that would be really great if they wore gloves while doing. Group 2 does alkalinity, copper, manganese, and total hardness. Group 3 does a heterotrophic plate count, ammonium, and pH. And Group 4 does sulphate, color, nitrate, total chlorine, and iron. So I'm not going to go through every test. After this webinar, I'm going to post the PowerPoint presentations, which include the instructions for every test on our website. And I also have now on our website by the lesson plan link in PDF format for each kind of test, the PowerPoint presentation slides with the pictures for each test. But just so that it's not very repetitive, we're not going to go through every test today. Are there any questions so far? Do you have anything to add, Tracy?
Nope, so far so good.
Okay, so the first test I'm going to talk about is the arsenic test, and that's the only test that Group 1 does. So these are the instructions, and I'm not going to read them to you because, well, that would be very boring, and I'm sure you can read them to yourselves, and the instructions are in the lesson plans and also in the PowerPoint slides that are in that link by the lesson plans. So basically, you get the materials that you need for the test, and you follow the steps. And then at the end, you figure out your results, and you figure out whether they are above or below or meet the guidelines for Canadian drinking water quality. So that's the end of the instructions for Group 1 because they only do that one test. Now Group 2, as I said, does alkalinity, copper, manganese, and total hardness. So the one that I picked to show you is the alkalinity test. So these are the pictures for the alkalinity test, and it of course also includes all of the necessary materials. You even get the plastic cups and all of that. And the only things you might need are things like a graduated cylinder and things like that I'm sure you have in your science labs anyways. And you follow the procedure, and then again they figure out their results, and they figure out whether the water meets the guidelines for Canadian drinking water quality. And we just recently added in a calculation to figure out the parts per million. So that's kind of interesting too, that they can do that calculation. And the instructions for Group 3, well, Group 3 does heterotrophic plate count, ammonium, and pH. The heterotrophic plate count is the one that has given us the most grief over the years. I know that sometimes there are a little bit of problems with the plates leaking or something like that. So if ever you experience that, you can always call or email, and we'll always replace any materials that have had problems while they were being shipped. The ammonium test is the one that I picked to show you today. So again, you follow through those steps, and at the end, you figure out whether it meets the, in this case it's actually the aesthetic guideline, aesthetic European Union limit, I believe it is. That's not going to note. Because there's no Canadian drinking water guideline for ammonia, you compare it to the European Union limit. And so that talks about that. Also for hardness, we use the Saskatchewan guideline, as that is the guideline that we have here in Saskatchewan, and there's no specific guideline, I believe, in the Canadian guidelines for safe drinking water. Does anybody have any comments at this point? Okay, no. So the last group here, instructions for Group 4, sulphate, color, nitrate, total chlorine, and iron. So I've picked the iron test to show you today. And so these are the materials and the pictures of the materials and the steps that students do in order to perform this test. This is also a test that's performed quite often in the new Operation Water Biology test because the Operation Water Biology program teaches students about iron, ammonia, chlorine, and chloramine. And again, they compare it to the Canadian guidelines for drinking water quality. They get a Canadian guideline limit sample for iron, and then they compare the color to the color that results from that sample. So I'm going to let Tracy take it away with a different method of dividing the materials from students, how she uses the kits in her classroom, and some tips and tricks that she uses as well in her classroom.
Okay, first of all, hi everybody. The slide that you're going to see now is actually a slide of my classroom, and I took some of these pictures after my students left. But this is how I initially set up the class, was just moving all of my desks into groups of 6. And as Nicole suggested, I have set this up actually over the years in several different ways than what she just went through with you. Not to say that any one way is better than the other. It really depends on the kids that you have within that different class. And what I'm going to do, since I can't tell if you want to ask any questions, is as I change each slide, I'll stop talking in case there's any questions.
Actually, if anybody does have a question, they can raise their hand. It's the button at the bottom of the participant window, the blue hand with the green arrow, and so if you want to raise your hand or if you want to type a question in the chat box, you could do that, and that might ease Tracy's transition from slide to slide.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so one of the things that I've done is ahead of time is I will set up my class so that every single group does every single test. Only what I'll have the students do is have one group as the control group, and in some ways one could argue that's not quite as exciting because they know that all of their tests should fit within the standard because they are the control, but it's still really interesting to actually go through and do all the tests. One of my groups will be of the well water perhaps they brought in. Sometimes they bring in water from a local aquifer. My school feeds from such a large area that we have students that are on town water, different types of town water from different areas, well water that might be up in the mountain. I use the word loosely here for the Maritimes, large hill maybe from out west. But along the South Mountain, we do have a lot of problem with uranium and with arsenic. And so depending on where they get their water from, sometimes we do get some readings on the arsenic level. Other areas of well water could be along the valley floor, so it could be quite heavy in nitrates or other runoff from agriculture.
Yes, Janet, you have a question. And then Tracy, you've raised your hand.
I didn't mean to raise my hand. I thought that's how I answered the question.
Oh, sorry. So your question, please, Janet?
I started typing it, so it might end up coming to you, and then I thought it'd be faster if I asked. Tracy, do you think, since you say that being there as a group that does the control could be a bit boring, is that a possibility for the teacher to be the control group and then demo the test to the other group?
That's a really good question. However, because my class sizes are rarely under 25 students, and as the facilitator, since I let my students do all of the tests, I find that if I was trying to do the test at the same time, I would not be as free to go around and answer questions or clarify some of the instructions. So I just explain that obviously one group will be doing the control. I don't say to them, obviously, you know, that you're the control, so it might be a little boring, because there will still be some color changes. I just let them know that they're very important because we're comparing all of our results to them. So that makes them feel good. The other point I was going to make is that since I have 4 other groups, I have my students go and get their own water samples. So from each group, someone will volunteer and bring in water. And since I often have 2 or 3 Science 10 classes each semester, that means I can actually draw from over 12 distinctly different communities as far as the type of water that we get. So it does make it really, really interesting for the students to, see what their results are.
I think that also if you were working with a smaller classroom and you did somehow have some extra time, one thing that could be done is the teacher could perform the test like beforehand, like the first day, and then the students could perform the test the second day so they could see the example being done on the control. It also really depends on your classroom size because, like as Tracy said, often her classrooms are over 25 students, and I know of classrooms that are big as 35, 40 students, and then I've taught classrooms as small as 8 students. So obviously if you only have 8 students, you have a lot of materials to go around for those 8 students. When I've had teachers who teach 40 students, sometimes they order 2 kits for the one class so that they can have their students be more hands-on and use the materials more. So I guess it all depends on your situation. But that could be a good way of doing it, Janet. If you had a small classroom and more time, I think the first day the teacher could do all the tests as an example, first day or 2, and then the second day or the third day the students could do the tests.
I agree. And again, as I said, it really depends on the teacher and the nature of the students that you have, because depending on the year, sometimes my Science 10 class might be exceptionally capable, and I may also have a Science 10 class where, because of the courses they chose, they're almost self-streaming, and they could have a lot of different challenges whereby they wouldn't be able to follow all the instructions on the tests, which I have showing here. What I do is I will make up a folder and I'll put all the tests in the folder so the students can basically work at their own speed as they go through the test. So here's another picture of the kids. They just finished doing, I forget which test, but they're quite excited because their sample passed. So they were giving the big thumbs up when I came around and asked how they were doing. And by the way, I have permission from all the students that you see in these various pictures to have them posted on this webinar. One of the things I also do, besides having all the tests run off and already in the folders, is I'll have a basin, and that's where they put all of their wastewater. I also make sure that I have paper towel on each table area in case they spill anything. I also ask that they have a section of paper towel where all the garbage goes so it makes it easier to clean up. And all of their supplies and chemicals I put in this basin. It's just another plastic container. So as they go through the various tests, they can just pick out whatever they need from that. So it has graduated cylinders, extra test tubes just in case they want to use extra test tubes or something. So that's all put there in that basin. Here they're getting ready to do the heterotrophic plate count, and I agree with Nicole. Over all the different years, sometimes we find that when the plates actually get to us, there's already some bacterial growth on the agriculture, or maybe because of temperature changes they went through as they're being shipped from out west to here in the east. Sometimes they're really runny or almost soupy. I have suggested that maybe it might be a possibility to have the agar shipped in the powder form, and then science teachers could just mix it up themselves and prepare their own plates. But I certainly appreciate that not all teachers may have access to sterile conditions or an easy way to make it, so that might not be a realistic situation. Having said that, even when there's been a little bit of bacterial contamination, my students have still been really excited to do the test and just see if any more bacteria happens to grow on it. And we have had some really spectacular bacterial growth that have basically come from our water, and usually those were from the raw water that they got out of the river or the aquifer. So this is just another shot, and you can see a little more clearly the different basins here where all their supplies were, their paper towel. In this class I had 7 people actually that were working in a group. So she's just standing there, I guess, getting some of her chemicals. And I also asked the students to rotate the tests around so that you didn't have a situation where just the same person was doing all of the tests, and that's something that the students really enjoyed. So the students were arranged so that there would be a reader, and that person would be responsible for clearly going through the instructions of that test. They would also be responsible for reading out to their group the pros and cons of having too much or too little of that particular chemical in their water. And that's one thing in particular that I've always really, really appreciated about these kits. It's not just having 13 science experiments arrive in a box. It's also the fact that on their data sheets you can actually find out, well, why is it a problem if you have too much iron? Or, you know, what are some things that can happen if you don't have enough? What about calcium or nitrates or sulfates? So it gives you the health implications as well for a lot of these different chemicals. As you can see, my students are definitely engaged. I don't think there's any pictures where people are just kind of sitting back. I was able to get all of the tests done, or I should say my students were, in one 75-minute period. It did take a little planning. I had explained to them the day before exactly what they were going to be doing so far as getting into groups. So they pre-selected who they were going to work with, which probably saved us about 5 minutes. I had all of the supplies ready to go so that when they came in, they already knew to grab their folder of instructions, their basins, their supplies. The desks were already set up, and so basically they just got right into doing their tests. You can also download from the site this sheet here, which is a sheet that allows the students to record the results of every test that they're doing. Some of them they have to record an actual numerical value as to what their readings are, especially for some of these here where they're comparing the colors and taking a reading. Sometimes it's simply on a pass-fail scale or rating, such as the color, whether or not it's the same color as the control. And that's the other interesting thing. I found that when I had my students set up like this, with one table being the control and 4 tables doing the other samples of water, is that I deliberately set up the folders so that everybody had the same test in the same order, because it occurred to me that if they're doing different tests, then the control group may not have done that test yet for them to actually compare to. So that is one stipulation that I asked my students, that they do the test in the order that they find them in the folder. I can't really think of anything else to say here. I had my student teacher who's standing in the background in this class, and I will say that it was very, very helpful having another adult to just answer questions. And again, this is why I personally wouldn't find it useful, because of my class sizes, for me to be demonstrating the control tests, because I find it a lot easier just to be available to run around, answer questions. Sometimes they may misread the instructions, and so I have to do a little damage control. And because I teach science and I have access to different chemicals, sometimes if they spill something, I can just quickly go in my back room and replenish, like the methyl indicator, for example, or things like that. So I guess that's all the slides that actually have my students. And I see there's a question.
Hi, Tracy. I was just wondering what the age of your students is that you do these labs with.
Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm not sure if you can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me, please.
Yes, we can hear you, Tracy.
Okay, good. It's just my mic button didn't seem to be working properly. I have done the high school water kit tests with grade 10 students, and that's the class that I've been showing in these PowerPoint slides. I've done it with grade 11 students, and I've also done it with my grade 12 geology class. And that was a smaller class the year I did it with them. I think I only had 17 students. And it was really interesting because with that group, I actually took on more of the role of the moderator, and I was the one who read the test out to them and had everybody do the test at exactly the same time. We had a timekeeper for when you needed to shake something for 20 seconds or 30 seconds. And then while they were waiting for their time, I would explain to them and elaborate a little bit about the different chemicals and what would happen if there was too much or too little. And that was an interesting way to do it too. I found that the students were a lot more attentive, obviously, when I was reading the instructions and the information. But at the same time, even though it worked out really well, when I reflected on it, I thought that it was a lot better for the students to be a lot more engaged on their own and independent, and giving the power to them to actually do that themselves, like read all of their own instructions.
Just so that you know, the Safe Drinking Water Foundation recommends elementary operation water drop kits, which is a different kit which tests different elements of the water. It tests 8 things in the water compared to the high school kits, which test 13. And it also only compares the control to the local water, so you don't get to test as many different water samples. That kit is for grades 4 to 8, and it's also different in that the teacher does some of the tests as demonstrations, and then some of the other tests are done by the students. The high school Operation Water Drop Kit, which we are talking about today, is for grades 9 to 12, we say. But again, everything always depends on your students. So if you have a weak class of grade 9 students, so for example, modified science, you may want to do an elementary Operation Water Drop Kit with them. On the other hand, if you have a group of academically talented grade 8 students, you may want to challenge them with a high school kit, for example.
Another thing I found too is that some students have asked if they could do water tests for science fair projects, and having gone through the Operation Water Drop certainly gave them an idea of some of the things that they would be looking for and testing for.
Any other questions before we move on to talk about, for example, an overview of our other programs? Any other questions? Yes, Janet, you have a question.
As a non-science teacher, do you have any other recommendations? Like in my classroom, I just teach a regular French immersion classroom, so if you have any suggestions, that would be great.
Well, our kits are also available in French. I think and I hope that the instructions are clear enough whether you are a science teacher or a non-science teacher. I myself, my education background is that I have an education degree with a major in math and a minor in French, and I was a science teacher for a year, so I know what it's like, and I think just reading over the papers ahead of time to get yourself familiar with it, calling me or emailing me if you have any questions at all, things like that will really help you to feel prepared.
I would add to that too that the instructions are very clearly laid out. It's literally just like following a recipe, and even students who aren't strong readers usually do not have any problems working their way through the instructions. And if you're doing this in a non-science classroom, I don't see that as a problem. I would see if you could borrow basins or even just containers for your wastewater. They definitely do not have to be as big as the basins that I put out. I just found that easier. And just have your class arranged into groups. And I'm sure that as far as the measurement using graduated cylinders, you could probably just borrow those from your science lab. Other than that, you definitely don't have to be a science person to do this. It's really, really well laid out and very clearly explained.
Annette, you have a question.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me. I'm just wondering how long it takes to do all the tests in the high school kit.
Well, the very first year I did it, I had to do it over 2 periods because I'd never done it before, and I didn't realize that some tests take longer than others, and that it's good to do some of the tests first so that while you're waiting for them to work, such as the arsenic test, it has a 10-minute wait time before you do anything else to it. While you're waiting, you could be doing other tests. Now that I've had the chance to fine-tune it, as I said, getting everything ready ahead of time and talking to the students ahead of time and preparing them for it, I find that we can just barely squeeze it in a full 75-minute period.
It also, I find, depends on whether you do it the method that Tracy has just presented or the method that I had presented. The method that I had presented, where the groups do the different tests, is structured so that it takes about 60 minutes. And when the group does the arsenic test, they can just wait because that's the only test that they do. If you're first starting with a kit, you may want to start, at least with one class, doing it that way, just because I find it easier, or you could try it Tracy's way and be brave. So I think that if you do it the way that we had traditionally been suggesting to teachers, it takes an hour or less. I do it with classes of university students, though, education students who are going to be science teachers, so obviously their level of reading and all that is faster and all that, but I find it takes less than an hour in that case, but I think it depends on how you set it up and your students. It always depends on your students.
And I agree with that. And the other neat thing about doing it the way Nicole suggested is that you could also have the groups obviously doing all of those tests for that group for that one type of water. So when students bring in their water sample, they may not be actually working on their particular water sample for all the tests. So it's kind of neat for them to find out afterwards, well, how did my water turn out for these various tests? And it does save more time.
Any other questions?
Okay, I'll just say one more thing. I actually went into Acadia University and spent about 3 hours with the secondary science student teachers. It was only supposed to be an hour, but we got talking and they were so keen and excited, and I had shown them the Operation Water Drop, and they had more and more questions, and so we actually got it out and just worked through some of the tests. And I had anticipated this, so Nicole kindly sent me 2 extra kits, which I raffled off, and those kids were so excited to get a copy of them. But I've since had so many student teachers go through or run in to me at our provincial conference and talk about how much they've enjoyed doing the Operation Water Drop kits, because they are very user-friendly and the kids get very, very engaged. And you have all kinds of potential for taking what they've learned and going in different directions depending on your goals.
Yeah, I think it really brings the science home to speak for the students, because they're testing their own water that they drink every day, and they're doing it using hands-on experiments with real materials like scientists would use. So I think that it's really real life and relevant and really beneficial to the students. I think another big part of this is what you do after the kit. So before using the kits, it's important to prepare the students with information about drinking water, like the water cycle and water conservation and different drinking water issues, maybe particularly relevant to your community. And afterwards, it's important that you take your students' information and share it with the community. So there's a lot of teachers who hold water conferences, water workshops, who have teachers and other teachers and parents come in and they show videos, they give presentations. So there's a ton of different things that you can do to raise awareness after the fact too. And also, if your local water meets all the guidelines, it's really important to tell people, you know, our local water meets all the guidelines and we shouldn't be buying bottled water because it's bad for the environment. Annette?
But I'm just wondering, with disposal of the chemicals, what are they down the sink, or do they have to be disposed of in a particular way?
Well, they're very, very minimal amounts of chemicals. So when I've done it at the University of Saskatchewan, we've always just down the sink or in garbage things. Tracy, is there any particular way that you suggest, or do you do that the same way?
Well, with the exception of arsenic, I find that all the other chemicals aren't what I think are of any concern as far as the environment is concerned, although I do have the kids run the water in the sink when they flush it, just to make sure that it is diluted. But the arsenic solutions I take to my chemistry lab, because we have a container where we can put any chemicals that we're concerned about as far as being toxic, and those get brought to Acadia University and they dispose of them properly. Obviously, can you hear me?
You're very quiet, very faint. We can hear you, but it's very quiet.
Okay, I'll start over again. Sorry, I forgot that I had moved the microphone closer to me, but then when I wasn't talking, I let it down, and so it was hanging down off my computer. Sorry about that. I just said that at my school we have a chemistry lab, obviously, where we have special containers that we put different types of toxic chemicals, and then at the end of the year, we take them to Acadia University, to their chemistry department, and they deposit or dispose of them properly. And I recognize that not every school has that opportunity, but even with the arsenic, I have to just look at it from the perspective that this is water that we got from a local area, and the arsenic level is not that high that we would be concerned. So if I didn't have access to our disposal unit in our chem lab, I would probably just flush it well in the sink.
Okay, I believe that Annette is maybe typing a question. Oh, just thanks. So if there's other questions, then please ask them, and if not, then we'll move on to the rest of the webinar. Okay, so the kit also comes with a DVD downstream, which is a short documentary by Leslie Iwerks. It's the modern-day David and Goliath story of big oil. At the heart of the oil sands in Alberta, Canada, one courageous doctor, that would be Dr. John O'Connor, who's on our board as well. He put his career on the line to fight for the lives of the First Nations people living and dying downstream from one of the most polluting and toxic oil operations in the world. And we have a question and answer sheet on our website, as well as an answer key and lesson plans that accompany the DVD. Another suggestion that we give is, as we've heard, there is some funding from TD Friends of Environment Foundation chapters across Canada, but if your area is not funded or does not have a TD Friends of Environment Foundation chapter, or you want more kits than we're able to provide you sponsored, one way to raise funds would be to show this DVD, because this DVD can be shown to the public for any purpose, for commercial or otherwise. Have an information evening with parents and community members, and maybe charge them a toonie or have a silver collection or something like that at the door. And then you could use those funds in order to purchase the kits that you want for your classroom. What some other teachers have done is use the bottles and cans money, the recyclables, to purchase kits for their classroom. So that's another way that you might be able to get the money for the kits for your classroom. So again, like I said, lots of kits are funded by the TD Friends of Environment Foundation and other sponsors. Typically, we send about 900 and some kits per year to schools across Canada. Where our goal is 1,000, and sometimes we make that goal and sometimes not quite. So around 1,000 kits per year. Operation Water Drop, elementary and high school kits, Operation Water Pollution kits, Operation Water Biology kits. Okay, and there are also 6 other environmental education programs that are available from the Safe Drinking Water Foundation. One of them is Operation Water Pollution, which is a program for students in grades 5 to 12, and teaches them about what water pollution is, what causes it, what can be done about water pollution, and what they personally can do about the problem. It includes a digital TDS and digital pH meter, and both are reusable for at least 2 years. And we actually guarantee that, so if you purchase a digital TDS or digital pH meter, or even if you get one sponsored for your school, and you find that you've been using it normally, none of your students have, kicked it or anything, and that it's not working, then let me know, phone me or email me, and we will replace that for you free of charge. And you also get a crapshoot DVD, which also has question sheet, answer key, and lesson plans on our website. And that's another opportunity that you could have a movie evening or something in your school to raise funding for either to purchase the kits, or if the kits were sponsored for you, what you could do with that funding is to have some other water-related event or purchase kits next year in case you don't get the sponsored kits. So those are options to raise money so that you're able to buy the kits for your students that they need to use.
I'd like to just cut in for a minute too and just point out that both the downstream and the crapshoot are superb, and they fit in with the curriculum for a lot of other subjects, not just science or Science 10. They've got aspects of them that would fit in really well with global studies, for example, social studies, geography, biology. But one of the things we've done is that we've shown them in our school's performance center. Maybe the last class on a Thursday afternoon, charge students a toonie to come and watch, and different teachers will encourage their students to go. And we use that as a fundraiser, as Nicole was suggesting, and you can use that money then to order other kits or to donate it to other charities, depending on what you want to do.
Or to donate to the Safe Drinking Water Foundation. That would be great. So the Operation Water Biology Kit is our newest kit, and it's a series of 8 lesson plans designed for use with students in grades 9 to 12. And it teaches students about biological water treatment, which is a more environmentally friendly and effective method of treating drinking water compared to the conventional chemical method of water treatment. And it teaches students about chlorine, chloramine, ammonia, and iron. Unfortunately, this is the only kit right now that's not available in French, where the lesson plans and the kit material labels and all that are not available in French. We are going to try to translate that this summer, and then this fall, it will be available in French. So that's a big project that I'm taking on there. And Operation Community Water Footprint, OCWF, is related to Operation Water Biology. It's designed for students in grades 6 to 12, and it allows students to calculate the amount of source water that is required to produce 1 liter of drinking water in their community, and it's often more than they expect, because 1 liter of source water does not equal 1 liter of drinking water. Then students can put their school on the map by using the website application on our website and entering their community's water footprint and what they are doing in order to improve the drinking water situation and share information with others. This program is available free of charge online. So it's a method of calculating how much source water is required to produce 1 liter of drinking water. You may have heard of similar things for products such as a hamburger or an apple, but this is for water. So 1 liter of water, again, doesn't equal 1 liter of treated water. And it connects to Operation Water Biology because it teaches them about biological water treatment versus chemical water treatment. And any community that has a biological water treatment system installed is going to find that their community's water footprint is a lot lower than their community's water footprint would be if they had a chemical water treatment system or if they were to compare it to another community that had one. Operation Water Health is designed for students in grades 5 to 12, and the students explore common disease-causing microbes found in water, how the microbes are removed or inactivated in water with water treatment, and the diseases these microbes cause when they are not identified and treated in the drinking water systems. And the students ponder the question, is it cheaper to treat the illness or treat the water? And that program is available free of charge online, and it's also available in Cree and in French. And Operation Water Spirit is designed for students in kindergarten, grade 2, grade 5, and grade 7 to 12. So there's some different units available for different levels. Now that's not to say, for example, that you couldn't use, for example, a kindergarten or some kindergarten stuff with some grade 2 stuff with grade 1 students, or mix and match different activities so that you could use it with different grades, levels of students that aren't technically covered in that program. And the program reinforces Aboriginal culture and perspectives regarding water for Aboriginal students, and provides an Aboriginal perspective to non-Aboriginal students about water issues. It invites teachers to encourage classroom discussions to enable students to gain a closer understanding of Aboriginal issues and perspectives surrounding drinking water, and it's available free of charge online. Not sure why it's always advancing 2 slides. Operation Water Flow is recommended for students in grades 6 to 12 and encourages students to establish the true cost of water, economic and environmental, the social responsibilities of providing safe drinking water, the need for national regulations, and the need for water conservation, source water protection, etc. Operation Water Flow is cross-curricular, so it involves a lot of different curricula, a lot of different grade levels, a lot of different subjects, and supports and encourages a broad understanding of information related to drinking water issues. And it's also a program that's available free of charge online, and is available in French, and I don't believe it's available in Cree. And that says, my screen says we have been in session for over an hour. Well, we are recording this, so the video will be available on our website. I know you came in a little bit late because you had lost that link. the recording will be available on our website, but the time starts when the first person enters the room. So I entered the room at 4 o'clock to load everything up, so half an hour early, so it counted that time as well. And our mission at the Safe Drinking Water Foundation is to encourage the universality of safe drinking water by supporting innovative research and development, to increase the awareness of health concerns from consumption of poor quality water, and to act as a policy advocate to ensure appropriate action is taken to provide safe drinking water to all people. Are there any questions or any comments? I'm wondering if you are interested in using these kits in your classroom, if you have concerns regarding funding. I have some other sources of funding that I could tell you about, or some other ideas as well. Okay, so Beth has asked how much a kit costs. So the high school Operation Water Drop Kit, which we've mostly been talking about today, is $140. That includes the shipping and the handling, and there are no taxes. The elementary Operation Water Drop Kit is $70. And then the Operation Water Pollution Kit is $140, and that's the one that's guaranteed to be reusable for at least 2 years. So that means that for at least 2 years you can use that kit with many different students in your school. And the Operation Water Biology Kit is also $140. And that's asking, she says, this may have been answered earlier, but what is an optimal group size for doing the test? So we based the kit development on a classroom of 30 students. However, we have gotten some comments that the students aren't able to be as hands-on involved with that size of a class. So, I mean, it all depends on your budget, and it depends on how hands-on involved you want your students to be. So, I mean, ideally, groups of 4 would be good. So if you have 4 groups of 4, that's 16 students. So if you had a class of about 32 students, it might be possible that you might want to get a second kit. Or you could have bigger groups. Tracy uses one kit with up to, I believe it is 30 students. Is that correct, Tracy?
Yeah, and I just finished writing in a response to the previous question. I don't know if you could read it yet or not, but I just said that I've had groups of anywhere between 3 or 4 kids up to 8 when I've had really, really large classes, and it all works well. It just depends on how you want to set the kids up.
Okay, and Jana says she believes that they've received funding and will receive packages this week. That's great if that's the case. I'll need to check my database because I don't know of any kits that are being sent this Monday, but that's possible.
Actually, I guess I'm on spring break holiday time. They were said to arrive probably during the week that we started our school, our spring break, which was around March 11th.
Well, that makes sense because I think, Nicole, that's when you said the kits would probably get out to people after being mailed out. I think you said on the 7th?
Yes, we had a huge mail out on March 7th. We sent out over 300 kits, about 350 kits to schools across Canada. And I just looked at the database, and yes, some were sent to Fernie. Does anybody have any questions about any of this? Maybe they're wondering about how to get funding. Maybe they want to send me an email later to go on the waiting list, or maybe they want some suggestions of how to get the funding for their kits. Okay, that's great, Annette. You just received your kits. Now, do you feel all prepared to use them in your classroom, all excited and prepared?
Well, I feel a little bit prepared, but I need to look at them more. But I'm a chemistry teacher, so I'm not too concerned about the chemicals.
Any concluding words, Tracy?
Well, first of all, being a chemistry teacher, you'll find using the kit will be a breeze, and I think you'll find that your kids are just going to love it. Other than that, I don't really have anything in particular other than answering any questions that anybody might have.
I'm just really looking forward to seeing the results. We're in a rural area with a lot of well water, so who knows what we're going to find.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So if anybody has any questions, if they don't feel quite ready yet, if they have questions about their specific classroom or anything like that, I've typed my email address in the chat box there, info@safewater.org, and my phone number in the office, which is 306-934-0389. And please feel free to contact me at any time if you have any questions, or if you want to be placed on the waiting list for sponsored kits, or if you want some more ideas of how to get funding for kits in your classroom. One way to get funding for kits is to ask some local businesses or Kiwanis or Rotary or any groups like that if they'd be willing to sponsor kits for your classroom. We've had some groups like that doing some sponsorships for schools in their area or in their community. Annette, you have a question?
Yeah, because I missed the first 12 minutes, I just want to know how I can access an archive of this.
Sure. You would go to our website, which is on the screen now, www.safewater.org, and then under webinars, webinar videos, and there are all the videos of previous webinars. So if anybody here really enjoyed this webinar, they might want to check out some of the previous ones that we've done for students in schools, like our Crapshoot webinar, which shows Crapshoot, the DVD, and talks about how students can make their own environmental films. Also, the Downstream webinar, which we presented, is really interesting. You can watch Downstream, and you can hear a panel discussion between Leslie Iwerks, who created the film, along with Dr. John O'Connor and George Poitras and Andrew Nikiforuk. They had a panel discussion on the issues contained in the film. No, you don't need any passwords. I'll type the direct link into the chat window.
I would just like to add, too, that I can't remember, I think it was either Annette or Janet that said they taught chemistry. Depending on when you choose to use these kits, if you've got to the point where you're talking about different types of bonds, like polar, non-polar, that sort of thing, and you're doing maybe scale and scum with hard water because of the calcium and those sorts of things, the Safe Drinking Water kit, of course, would possibly let kids see whether or not any of their water was really hard, but it could also be kind of a neat lead into that as to different solubility of dissolved minerals and looking at how detergents work.
Thanks. I planned on doing it when I did hard water analysis, but I'm doing solubility right now, so maybe I'll fit it in a little sooner. I'll have to think about that for a bit.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up now. So if nobody has any other questions, I want to thank everyone for coming and Tracy for helping us to present this session. She has a lot of really hands-on experience using these kits in her classroom, so while I'm here behind the scenes doing the admin work to get the kits out to the classrooms, she's the one who really knows how it works best with students. So it was great having her talking to us today. about using the kits in her classroom. And don't forget, do not hesitate to contact me if you have any questions at all about the kits or about how to use them in your classroom specifically or anything like that. Just email me or phone me and I'll be glad to chat with you about it. Okay, and in the chat box, Tracy has given her email address out in case anybody has any questions for her. She would also be a good person to email in terms of if you have any specific questions about how to use the kits in your classroom. Okay, have a good day, everyone, and thank you again for coming to our webinar.